Welcome to the Chess Assassin channel.
In this game, notice how consistent Black is in contesting White's potential pawn center. Bishop b4 pins the knight, which covers the e4 square. Another thing is that depending on the line of play, knight c3 is often transferred to the e4 square, a square from which it would pressure the pawn on d6. d5 is played immediately. The pawn on d5 takes control of the e4 square. Capturing the pawn on c4 does three things. First, it makes the d5 square available for Black to utilize. Secondly, it helps to clear the a8 to h1 diagonal. And lastly, it is consistent with Black's plan to play b6 and fianchetto the light square bishop. You're probably wondering why White chose to drop the queen back to c1. First, you gotta understand that as chess continues to evolve, so does the need for new ideas. I've heard one man say, people are still making novelties. We can see that knight from b to d7 was played instead of playing the knight to c6, and I'm going to explain why. The bishop on g5 pins the knight to the queen on d8. Depending on White's setup, if bishop g5 was not played, that would give Black more freedom to first play the pawn to c5, then follow up with the development of the knight from b8 to c6 instead.
Take a look at this diagram. I'll give you an example. Bishop on c1 is closed in. The pawn has been played to e3, which means the bishop on c1 cannot go to g5. But in this case, the knight on c6 now controls a5, has an eye on b4, d4, and e5. Now back to our game.
Continue. From this point on, both players were able to demonstrate their middle game prowess. The move that was played in the game was King G7. Let's go back. Take a look at the rook on B2 and the queen on F6. Another move was to play the pawn to G4. If you use your X-ray eye to focus on the pawn on F2, you will see that if white were to capture the pawn on G4, queen takes F2 check, followed by queen H2 checkmate. The move played was King G7 and the game continued. Now, this is a game that I was playing in Hyde Park at Washington Park. I'm playing the black side. My opponent starts with D4. Now, this is the Slav defense. I'm playing the Slav defense. D5, C4, C6. Knight C3, Knight F6, Knight F3. I played H6 to keep a piece off G5, and after H3, Bishop to F5. My opponent continued with Bishop to F4. E6, E3, A6, Bishop D3. Knight E4, Queen C2. Now, one thing that I always teach is that if you want the initiative, if you want to gain the initiative, then you have to be willing to sacrifice for it. My knight on E4 is attacked 3 times by the queen on C2, knight on C3, and bishop on D3. They all attack the knight, my knight on E4. So I was willing to sacrifice a pawn to gain the initiative. I played knight d7, knight takes e4, d e4, bishop takes e4, and after a trade of bishops, notice that his king is uncastled. Check. Knight d2, queen a5. Now I have the initiative. I am attacking his knight on d2 twice. Rook d1. Now this pawn is under attack, has no protection. The knight is hit twice. Knight b6. Now I threaten to capture the pawn on c4. Queen c2, and after gaining tempo on the king's side, bishop h2, I captured the pawn on a2. The move that he played was b3. So my opponent folded under pressure. And after queen takes c2, the game was over.
Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.